Hello everyone. Today let us discuss the sources and collection of data. So this is most important concept in your syllabus, sources and collection of data. So data collection, this is one of the most important step of any research. So moreover, to succeed in research, you have to first succeed in data collection because always the right and accurate information and data leads to the success of research. So data collected through the primary sources or secondary sources serves as major part of any research, and therefore it is very important to understand the concept of sources and collection of data. So as far as the sources of data is concerned, the sources of data broadly classified as primary data and secondary data. Now let us understand what exactly the meaning of primary data and secondary data. Primary data, it is the first hand information collected by the researcher or investigator. Okay, it is first hand information collected by investigator. See the secondary data. So secondary data refers to second hand information. So this is a major difference. So primary data, it is called first hand information because it is collected for the first time. Okay, why primary data is called first hand information? Because it is collected for the first time and it is original and more reliable. On the other hand, if you see the secondary data, it is not originally collected. Okay, secondary data is not originally collected and rather obtained from already published or unpublished sources. Now what are the example for primary data or secondary data? You just see the example so that the concept will be very clear. So the example for primary data, the population census conducted by the government of India after every 10 years is the example for primary data. So after every 10 years the government of India conduct the population census survey. So this is one of the example for primary data wherein you collect first hand information. Okay, so most reliable and original information you collect. So that this is example for primary data. And see the secondary data. So the example for secondary data, the address of persons taken from the telephone directory, address of the person taken from telephone directory, or the phone number of a company taken from the just dial or secondary data. So phone number taken from the just dial. So these are the example for secondary data. So this is already published and or published or unpublished sources. Okay, secondary data that you can collect from published sources or unpublished sources, but primary data, this is so first hand information, originally collected for the first time. So in the next slide I have mentioned some of the methods of primary and secondary data. Now primary data or the sources include a survey method. So this is one of the method of primary data. Observation method, experiments, questionnaires, focus group, interviews. So these are the primary data collection method. Secondary data include books, journals, articles, web pages and blogs, etc. These are the secondary sources of data. Now let us discuss some of the methods of primary data collection. The first method is observation method. So observation is one of the most important primary data collection method. Now what exactly the observation method? See the definition of observation method is given here. Observation is a technique that involves systematically selecting, watching, listening, reading, touching and recording the behavior and characteristics of living beings, objects or phenomena. So this is the definition of observation. What is observation? So observation is a technique that involves systematically you collect, systematically you watch, systematically you listen and you read, you ultimately you record the behavior and characteristics of the people. So you just observe the people and you record the behavior or characteristics of a particular objects. As the name suggests, observation method, okay, the name clearly suggests it is a way of collecting relevant information and data. I repeat, it is a way of collecting relevant information and data by observing. So this is observation method. So this is a very simple method. And uh, take example for observation method. Let us take some example for observation method. For example, a scientist looking at a chemical reaction in an experiment. So this is one kind of observation. Scientist observing the chemical reaction in an experiment. Similarly, a doctor watching a patient after administering an injection. Okay, and take another example. For example, an astronomer looking at the night sky and recording data regarding the movement and brightness of the object and he sees. Okay, so these are some example for observation method. Okay, now let us discuss what are the techniques of observation method. What are the different ways in which you can observe and collect the required or relevant data. The first method is direct observation and indirect observation. So there are two methods, direct and indirect observation. So direct observation refers to the situation when the observer remains physically present and personally monitors what takes place. Okay, in direct observation, observer physically present and he continuously watch and monitor what takes place. Okay, so that is direct observation. So what is indirect observation? Here physical presence of the observer will not be there. So in the case of indirect observation, so here given indirect observation occurs when the recording is done by mechanical, photographic, videotape, cameras or other electronic means. Okay, so direct observation where the researcher directly observe the behavior of particular objects, whereas in indirect observation the researcher observe the behavior of particular objects by mechanical devices. Okay, so here given by mechanical, photographic or videotape or camera or any other electronic means. So this is direct observation and indirect observation. In direct observation the physical presence will be there, but in indirect observation physical presence of the researcher will not be there. Next point, participant observation and non-participant observation. Now in the case of participant observation, the researcher not only observe the research participants. Okay, in the case of participant observation, as its name clearly suggests, the researcher not only observe the research participants but also actively engages in the activities of the research participants. Or in other words, here the researcher studies a group. Okay, researcher he studies a group not only by observing the group. Researcher studies the group not only by observing the group but also by participating in the activities of the group. Okay, he takes study on the group not only by observing. Okay, not only by observing the group but also by participating in the activities of the group, and that is why it is called participant observation. Now on the other hand, non-participant observation, here the researcher observe the subjects or things. In non-participant observation, the researcher observe the subjects or things without knowing them that they are being observed at all. Okay, during non-participant observation, it is important to observe not only what people are doing, okay, but also what people are not doing. Here the researcher not directly participate in the activities of the group or of the participants, okay, so he indirectly observe, okay, that is why this method is called non-participant observation method. Third point, structured observation and unstructured observation. So the structured observation, so it is a planned observation. Okay, structured observation, it is a planned observation of a phenomena, and to follow certain, it follows certain patterns, rules, and designs for the purpose. So what, how, and when to observe, everything should be very clearly. So this method is called structured observation because it is structurally designed. Okay, it follows a particular patterns, rules, everything should be very clear. That is why it is called structured observation. Whereas in unstructured observation is not systematic and unplanned observation. Okay, structured observation is systematic and planned observation, but unstructured observation is not systematic and unplanned observation. Take for example, so the example for unstructured observation, patient reaction to hospital may be observed in different phases. Okay, patient reaction to hospital may be observed in different phases. The admission room, okay, the first phase. Next, the initial the contact with the ward, that is the second phase, and element of the treatment phase, second. Next, third phase, element of the treatment phase, and finally on discharge from hospital. So these are the different phases, okay, structurally designed. Okay, so pattern will be there. So this is called the structured observation. So example for unstructured observation, example for unstructured observation, sorry, example for structured observation. So this structural observation is best to look at the single situation. For example, examining the experiences of elderly people admitted to care. The next point, controlled observation and uncontrolled observation. Now, when observation takes place according to pre-arranged plans, so this is like structured observation. When observation takes place according to pre-arranged plans with experimental procedure, then it is controlled observation. Okay, when observation takes place according to pre-arranged plan with experimental procedures, then it is called controlled observation. So generally it is done in laboratory under controlled condition. Okay, it is done in the laboratory under controlled condition, that is why it is called controlled observation. Whereas uncontrolled observation, when the observation takes place in natural condition, when the observation takes place in natural condition, that is uncontrolled observation. So uncontrolled observation like naturalistic observation. Okay, so when the observation takes place in natural condition, that is called uncontrolled observation. Now coming to the last point, naturalistic observation. So name clearly suggests what exactly naturalistic observation. So in naturalistic observation, naturalistic observation is a research method commonly used in psychologists and other social scientists. So this technique involves studying the spontaneous behavior of participants in natural surroundings. So it is very clear, and naturalistic observation means here studying the spontaneous behavior of participants in natural surroundings. Okay, the researcher simply records what they see in whatever way they can. Okay, so this researcher just record what they see in whatever way they can. So that is naturalistic observation. Here spontaneously observe the behavior of participants in natural surroundings, and that is why it is called naturalistic observation. So these are the important methods of observation. First, direct observation, wherein a researcher physically present. Indirect observation through the mechanical devices, and next participant observation and non-participant observation. The observer takes part in the situation in participant observation. In non-participant observation, the observer watches the situation openly but does structured observation and unstructured observation. Next, controlled and uncontrolled observation and naturalistic observation. I hope you understood the methods of observation and the concept primary data and secondary data. Thank you.